Hi, everybody. Welcome to Bob's Bookshelf. I'm your host, Bob. In this episode, we're going to be looking at the visual history of type. The author and designer of this book is Paul McNeil. He co-founded Muir-McNeil in 2009 with Hamish Muir. And Muir-McNeil's activities are focused on exploring systematic methods in type design, graphic design, and the moving image. I've used some of their typefaces, which are really quite amazing. They're designed to be layered up and then treated in different ways, and you can get literally infinite numbers of effects by using these typefaces. So anyway, quite an interesting and fascinating guy, and this book is amazing. So let's pin the image and then we can begin with this. All right, here we go. So beautiful presentation, cloth with two colors of foil stamping, white and black. It's got this little half jacket on it in Dayglow orange with black. I'm going to remove that because these things tend to just get dinged up and get in the way. So we'll move that out of the way. All right, so here we go. Just beautiful, beautiful presentation here. This book is a little dinged up because it sits right next to my bed, and I often find myself reading chunks of this right before I go to sleep. Not because it's so boring that it'll help me go to sleep, but because I'm hoping to influence the kind of dreams I have. Dreaming of type sounds like a pretty good thing. So let's see here. Let me move that over. Black end papers, half title, full title. Really lovely here, the way he's pushed his name back in gray on black. Here's our contents page, beginning to set up the grid, which is, it's a 4-column grid. We're just using these two and this one. And then the introduction, which continues to here. It's probably not visible in your video, but what's really great here is like, this is the key to the kind of information that's presented all the way through the book. And then this also introduces the typographic system that elucidates that information all the way through. So we have these little codes and it tells you what everything is. And then it tells you the other kinds of information that they're going to give you all the way through. One of the especially interesting and useful aspects of this book are these two sections here, which are connections, which talks about a list of preceding or succeeding typefaces that may have influenced the design of the typeface or been influenced by it. And then the availability. Can you find this type commercially so that you can use it? And if so, what form does it take? All right, so let's move on. The book has these section dividers. So for the purposes of this book, the story of type begins in 1450. We're not going to look at every single page, but anyway, so this sets up the beginning of the grid for the book. So 1, 2, 3, 4 columns on a page. Up here is that little section of explanatory details, the key. So what is this type? It's Gutenberg's Textura. Here are the characteristics. This is especially helpful if you want to start memorizing how to identify certain typefaces. And then here's a detail of some of the particular characters, and then some running text that gives us the story. All right. And then this is the specimen itself. And you can see it goes on in a similar way. Let's go to. Okay. This is really gorgeous, this specimen. So what we're seeing here is the grid handled in a different way. So we have a column on the outside edge on the left page and the outside edge on the right page. The other part of the sort of hierarchy system, the information navigation system of this, is the name always appears up here, and then the year over here. So we have running heads. Folios are down in the outer corners. Okay. So what's interesting is when you're looking at the years, you can often see that there are a lot of different kinds of typographic traditions happening simultaneously. So here we have fraktur, or what we might also call black letter. And at the same time, or a similar time, we have the first appearance of italic. Okay, and one interesting thing about that is originally there were no capital letters that were italicized. They used the Roman, the upright, and then only the lowercase letters were in italic. Okay, moving on. All right, here's another way the system manifests itself. 2 columns on the left, and then multiple instances of the type specimen here. Okay. Here's a sort of inverted version of that, where we have part of the specimen, column of text, specimen, column of text. Okay. So at a certain point, you know, the system of this book is what it is. It runs, it's beautiful, it's effective, and it slowly fades into the background as our interest in what these are become paramount. Okay. So as I go through this, I'm going to probably be spending more time on what this is rather than what the system is, because the system is well articulated, and it recedes as we go. All right, here's another beautiful instance of how this works. Specimen bleeds off the top of the page, and there's 2 columns on the left. How can you go wrong with an enormous giant character like this? What I especially like in this specimen, and I'm not sure you can read it in the video, but it says, can be cut to any size required. So any size required. In this case, this size. Beautiful, just beautiful. Okay, then we get to another section, jumping ahead to 1900. What's really interesting about the early part of the 20th century is how many different kinds of typographic traditions are reflected. And so many things appear that are still influential today. So let's move on to that. Okay, so here's Ekman Schrift. This is designed in 1900. Now, what's really interesting about typography and the history of that and type design is how contemporary designers are constantly inspired by the past. So here's Ekman, designed by Otto Ekman. Here is Ekman Psych, designed by James Edmondson in 2018 from the Ono Type Foundry. James is an alum of our program and a fantastic type designer. So here's his version where he has tweaked Ekman and made it into another kind of typeface. All right. So this is from the PDF type specimen that James has on his website. I downloaded it and printed it out for our purposes here. But one fascinating thing he writes about here at the bottom is he says, the process for actually translating Ekman's work was embarrassingly simple. I drew his version, pinched the middle, and rounded every corner. With surprisingly few moves, the dust was blown off a turn-of-the-century German relic, and a surprisingly funky child was born. Oh, missed a page. So, gig poster, and then something about alternate characters. All right. So moving on. So as we go through, every once in a while, there are typefaces where I have a sample of the actual specimen, and I'll share that with you when we get there. Okay. So here in 1907, we see Venus. So already the idea of sans serif becoming more prevalent. So 7 years separate these two things. Okay, so again, there are always multiple ideas, multiple traditions happening at the same time. All right, so in 1914, Centaur by Bruce Rogers, exquisite, classically influenced typeface. At the same time, Edel Grotesque, a condensed, sort of geometrically constructed typeface. This is sort of like the precursor to DIN. And then Gaudi Old Style, okay? And then Johnston's Railway Type, which is the precursor to Gill Sans. So all in this short time period, this enormous range of typefaces. Okay, jumping ahead to 1929, this is Beefer, designed by Cassandra. This is that famous typeface made out of heavy strokes and then thin parallel lines, okay? So a few years ago, Mark Fox and Angie Wang of Design is Play made this certificate for the Letterform Archive. So if you were a charter member, you got this exquisitely designed certificate. This is from 2019. So in order to make this, Mark redrew Beefer. And I'm not so sure how well this is going to show up, but he's broken the lines out. And in some cases, the lines are gold foil, metallic gold foil. And in some cases, they are metallic silver foil. And in some cases, they are just gloss black. So there's 3 colors of foil here: gloss gold, gloss silver, and gloss black on matte black paper. So it just sort of shimmers in the light in this really exquisitely beautiful way. All right, moving along. So the old made new again. That's what we're doing here much of the time. Okay, then we get to the late 1950s, right? This is the heyday of the beginning of the Swiss International style. So 1957, Helvetica. Also 1957, Meridian by Adrian Frutiger, an old style based typeface. Also in 1957, and also by Adrian Frutiger, is Universe. That was a busy year. And then in 1958, Optima. So swinging back and forth between the geometric and the humanist in a way. Okay, moving into the 1960s, where things get even more eclectic. This is Amelia by Stan Davis. This is for one of the phototype companies. So the technology of typefaces is shifting around this time from metal to film. They will shift again from film to digital in the 1980s. We'll see that as well. But again, to give you a feel for the range of kinds of typographic things happening, we have this, a typeface that's sort of hoping or referencing the future, to this, the New Alphabet by Wim Crowell, which stretches the realms of legibility. And then the same year, Sabon Antiqua by Jan Tschichold, a reworking of Garamond. And then Seymour Quast's Art Tone. So it's a very interesting time. Baby Teeth by Milton Glaser. It just keeps going. We're going to jump ahead. 1970, the introduction of Letraset instant lettering, or what we called press type when I was in school. I still have some press type here. So I have my 60 point Times New Roman. You can see I used some of these characters. Here's the rest of it. And I also have my, what is this? Caslon 540 italic in 30 point. So unlike our computerized systems where you specify a typeface and then you make it whatever size you want, with Letraset, if you wanted 60 point Times New Roman, you had to go out and buy 60 point Times New Roman. And you had to hope that wherever you bought your Letraset or your press type had it in stock. All right, let's move on. Oh, here's Glazer's stencil from 1970. We're going to jump ahead again to 1984. This is when everything changes again. This is Chicago. This is the original system font for the Macintosh, designed by Susan Kerr. And there are pixelated and rounded versions of this. A few years later, Zuzana Lichko of Emigre here in the Bay Area designed her set of what she later called low-res typefaces. So this is before PostScript, which allowed typefaces to be defined by curves. Here, the typefaces are defined by pixels. At the same time, we have all of this technologically based material. Once PostScript is invented by Adobe systems, then Adobe forms an in-house type group, and they design quite a number of typefaces we still use today. Adobe Garamond, Trajan, Utopia, all of these typefaces date from the late 1980s and early 1990s. So using new technology to revive older forms. Similarly, using new technology to make completely new forms. This is Blur by Neville Brody. And what Brody did is he put Helvetica on a stat camera and put it out of focus and then redrew those forms using Bezier curves. That's what Illustrator and typefaces use to define the edges of typefaces. All right, moving ahead. This is Suburban by Rudy Vanderlands from Emigre. I happen to have this specimen here. And this particular specimen, Suburban, is only a small part of. Let me find the part where Suburban actually appears. Okay, it's here. So this is the character set for the two weights. But all of Emigre's type specimens and type promotional books would always promote more than one thing at a time. So in this one, we have Whirligig, Suburban, and Platelet. So Whirligig is a set of geometrically constructed dingbats designed by Zuzana Lichko, and this shows you how to build these different kinds of patterns out of these things. This is back when you still had to phone your order in, phone orders, or fill out this thing and mail it. Mail it in to Emigre to get your typefaces. Okay, so that's how that works. All right, moving on. Also in this book is Comic Sans, which I found really fantastic because we hear all kinds of stories about Comic Sans. So it's good to get a more nuanced and researched story. Comic Sans was designed by Vincent Canari in 1994. I'm not going to go through the whole story. We can talk about that another time. All right, moving on to the later 90s. This is Mrs. Eves by Zuzana Lichko of Emigre, and I have two versions of the same type specimen for Mrs. Eves. That shows, I think, let's see, this is different from what he's showing here. All right, so these are the character sets. So because Mrs. Eves was designed to be a book face rather than a display face, as so many of the other Emigre fonts were, this promo takes the form of a very traditionally typeset text that refers in some ways to the kinds of specimens that Baskerville used. So Mrs. Eves is built on Baskerville in the same way, but with a different process than Eichmann's cyc was built on Eichmann. Okay, so here's the character sets, and then here's all the different parts. And there you go. Now, one fascinating thing that they did is they also did a letterpress version of this. So the exact same text was set and then printed letterpress. Let me find this same spread. Okay. So here's the spread printed offset on matte coated paper. Here's the spread printed letterpress on uncoated paper. I'm going to get these closer to the camera, hoping that you can see it a little better. So you can see that this one here, which is printed letterpress, the text is denser, right? So when the ink sits on the surface of type that's going to be printed letterpress, when the paper hits it, the type spreads a teeny little bit, making it a touch darker. So that's what this is showing here. Okay. Moving on. Here's Gotham, designed in the year 2000 by Tobias Fuhr-Jones. And you may not know this typeface by name, but this is the type that Barack Obama's campaign used. And so some people call this Obama type. Moving on. This is Dolly, designed by the Type Foundry Underwear. I have this promo, which is crazy. It's printed in Dayglow pink with metallic silver foil stamping. Dolly was named after this little dog, Dolly. And let me find the part of this that they're showing. So here's the spread in the book. That's matching the spread in the specimen. But really what's far more interesting, there's a CD in the front with the typeface on it. And here's a little story about bulldogs and other kinds of. So they use the type to set these vaguely scientific texts. So there's all these different samples in here. Then running text, and then the larger character sets. Okay. Dayglow, so good. All right, sorry, moving along. So one thing, this is Lino by Karl Naurut and Radim Peshko. One interesting thing about the technology used to make typefaces is that it has become democratized. And so rather than large corporate entities controlling what kinds of type get made and how it gets distributed, once you have inexpensive software and the internet, it allows much different kinds of type to be made and distributed and used. So this is from 2010, and that's one of the especially fascinating things about this. Okay, but in case you're wondering, this is L.L. Brown from 2011, and this is the typeface the college uses for its sans serif typeface. So if you've ever wondered what that type is, that all the stuff from the college is in, that comes to you, Brown from 2011. And then also from 2011 is Nokia Pure. What's interesting about this is the influence of the screen now circling back around, and in turn determining what kinds of type gets made for print, and the idea that type might or must, in a large branding situation, be designed to work in both realms, on the screen and on the page. Okay. And on we go to the end. Back, a glossary. So here's a glossary. This was one of the things I couldn't find for that other video where I'm talking about different parts of the book. So it's a list of words and their definitions. Here's further reading on type history, monographs, typography, and printing. And then here's a list of all the typefaces, the designers, and the foundries. Okay. And that, here's the acknowledgements and the picture credits. Again, the black end papers, stamping on the back. All right. So, all right. So I hope you enjoyed this. One of my favorite books, really quite an amazing volume. Every time I read this, I learn something new. And even though I've read it all the way through more than once, I still, every time I read it, some other little detail strikes my fancy. So that's it for today. Thanks for joining me here, and we'll see you next time. Bye.